So I think I'm done with the questions about metalogic and presuppositionalism, and we can move on. So next thing that I want to explore is the more popular apologetics that is more academic than the previous one. Now, since William Lane Craig, who you have debated, has successfully defended his rendition of cosmological argument and teleological argument, I'd like to know your general thought about the efficacy of Kalam cosmological argument and its potential power to prove or let us arrive at Christianity or a particular theistic worldview. Since William Lane Craig begins with somewhat less committed arguments that there is a cause to the universe, and then he follows up with saying that, well, that cause has to be this, and this, and then biblical God fits that description, and then and then he infers more and more. So, what is your general understanding of Craig's cosmological argument, and what do you think about the efficacy of it?
So we'll focus first on the initial syllogism,
Right.
which has as its conclusion that there's a cause of the existence of the universe. So I think that if you're a naturalist, you're definitely not going to accept the conclusion. You're not going to think that there's a cause of the existence of the universe. If cause is understood in a straightforward way, you might think that there's an explanation, because you might think that the universe exists of necessity, and why does it exist? Because it has to, right? So it's not that you're ruling out that kind of explanation, but you're not going to accept there's natural reality and it exists because there's something else, something not part of natural reality that caused it. That's, in my view, that's antithetical to naturalism. So I think that if you're a naturalist, you're going to object to the conclusion of the argument. So that takes us back to the premises. So there are two premises. One of them says that the universe began to exist, and the other says whatever begins to exist has a cause. Now, if we understand the second premise just to mean that the past is finite, so it's, the universe has a finite past, right, then the first premise will be whatever has a finite past has a cause of its beginning to exist. Now, suppose you think that beginning of the universe is necessary. That's consistent with its past being finite, but you're certainly not going to think that it has a cause. It doesn't need one. If it couldn't but have existed, then there's a further cause for that would be completely unnecessary. And if you're a naturalist, you think there's no such thing. So you're just going to reject the first premise. It's not true that whatever has a finite part has a cause of its beginning to exist, and the universe is the one counterexample to that. Right? That would be a kind of straightforward naturalist response.
That would be a response for the first premise.
Sorry, if you come that far with me, then the rest of the argument's irrelevant, because you haven't got to.
So the first premise is everything that begins to exist has a cause to its existence. Now, so I want to, before I ask you some follow-up questions, and I might even ask you to repeat yourself once more, but I want to clarify some ground concepts here. So when we talk causality and something having a cause and the universe having a cause, although in most conversations people don't actually force each other to define what they mean by cause, I still want to ask that question. So when we have such a conversation, what is a cause? What do we mean when we say, well, something has a cause to its existence, and then universe has a cause to its existence? So what do we have in mind when we use the concept cause?
I mean, that's quite a tricky question. So maybe what I will talk about is what I think of as necessary ingredients in the story, but I won't try and give you an analysis of causation because that's hopelessly controversial. So
Necessary
suppose
ingredient.
that so there's this question about what things can be related as cause and effect, and one tempting thought is that what gets related by cause and effect are events. Now,
Events.
yeah, events. So I'm the movement of the cue causes the motion of the ball when the cue strikes the ball on a billiard table. Right? So there's an event,
But
the striking of the ball by the cue that causes a subsequent event, the rolling of the ball down the billiard table. Right? So one thought is that you have at its root, causation is the relationship between events. That doesn't mean that it isn't also a relationship between things. There's a relationship, a causal relation between the cue and the ball, but it's in virtue of the events. The ball
so
being struck
just
by the cue,
yeah,
and the ball rolling down the table.
I just want to tuck in one question in there. So, does not that characterization necessitate some form of segmentation of how we understand the process to go? So you said, well, I'm playing the billiard and I use the cue and I hit the ball, and now it's as if you came in and you constructed walls in between events. As in, there is the process A that leads to process B. So, well, why should I follow you in that segmentation of temporal events? What if it's just one straight flow of events in terms instead of the instead of succession of blocks, as form of
So,
mechanical blocks?
so so that won't matter. And we can imagine partitioning this as fine as you like, and we can imagine it, if you like, being literally continuous. And there's a question about the world, whether the world's continuous or not. But we can. It still won't
But if it's
make it
continuous,
possible
then
to separate out the uh, the movement of the cue, the point, which maybe is slightly extended, where there's an interaction between the tip of the cue and the ball, and then a later point where there's no longer an interaction between the two, but the ball's rolling down. And we can think about this, if you like. We can describe it as a continuous process. I struck the cue ball. If you're going to go that way, one way to think about causation is that it's what relates. It's the relation that unfolds as time passes, something like that. So, if you think about the state of the universe at a given time, right, and make that as small as you like, and then think about the state of the universe at later times, and one of the causes of the state of the universe at later times is the state of the universe at earlier times. So there's a causal relation that relates history, something like that. And we don't have to, the way that I've now described it, you don't have to think of it as partition. You can just think of it as the changing of the state of the universe.
so the way we understand causation in this case is that if A causes B, therefore it means that B would have never happened without A, or B's existence is indebted to A. So A is the necessary ingredient for B.
So I'm certainly not supposing that it's sufficient, because causation might be indeterministic and then it's not going to be sufficient. So if there's a necessitation relation, it's certainly not going to go the other way.
But okay.
There are cases where you might think that it's not necessary either. I mean, there are cases like causal preemption, where one thing gets in and causes something But if it hadn't, there was another thing coming that would have caused it as well, and so it's not necessary. So it doesn't look like it's necessary for the effect. Like we both throw stones at a window, we're both on target, but my stone gets there first, so my stone breaks the window and yours doesn't. The breaking of the window is going to happen anyway. And there's a debate amongst philosophers about these kinds of cases and exactly what you should say about them. And it's like everything that we're talking about is way more complicated than we can do justice to in a short conversation.
So two questions. So I throw a stone at a window and it breaks. And every time I do it, it breaks. Every time my friends do it, it breaks. The natural intuition is that, well, you throw a stone in a window, and if it is heavy enough and if window is not protected, it breaks. So the throwing a stone at a window causes it to break. So I have some from human question. Isn't the addition of causal principle to that temporal events where all throwing a stone at a window, the fact that that event or that action is always followed by the action B, adding a causal link between these two events, doesn't that add something additional to it, or it is already there? It's just we are recognizing
Yeah. So Hume notoriously thought that perhaps the mind was adding something in this case, and philosophers disagree. I'm inclined to think it's just something that's already there.
Oh, okay.
In the world. And
that was unexpected. So you think
what I'm inclined to think is that there are kind of things have causal powers. Those causal powers get exercised. I kind of balked at talking about laws, and maybe I shouldn't go this way.
So
I'm happy to do it.
So I'm kind of surprised that you believe that. So causality is a property of universe itself, and it's not just our intuition.
That's what I think. I think that things have causal powers. It's nothing to do with our observing. There's a squirrel sitting underneath a tree. The tree branch breaks, falls on the squirrel and crushes it to death. There's a causal process.
But so what I'm
and it's got nothing to do with that.
But what I'm having a trouble with is like that. In order for us to conceive that as a sequence of causal events, we need to. Yeah, I'm circling back to it. I understand it, but it's as if there needs to be some form of partition of events. It's so. Like, where is this moment when the event A causes event B? What is the precise second in which the magic of A causing B takes place?
So if you think about events, right, they're spread out over time, and so what happens with my example with the tree? There's rot that gradually sets into the tree branch over a long period of time. But there comes a point where the branch snaps and the branch falls, and in the case that I'm imagining, you kill a small furry animal that's on the ground underneath. Now, there won't be such a thing as the precise instant at which the small furry animal dies. That's something that takes a period of time. Just as it took some time for the tree branch to fall from where it was to where it ends up, and it took a much longer period of time for the branch to become rotten, and so on. But all of this is causal.
Yes, and this is causal, and what I'm pointing is like in order for us to believe in that, we need to at first envision world as composed of events and things, as opposed to just continuous processes. So you want.
So I'm happy with that. I mean, I think that probably it's good to have. If I could, I would have an ontology just of things, but I don't think that's possible, right? So I think that you need things like states, events, processes. There's a bunch of other things that you should have in your ontology in order to do justice to the world. But one thing that won't disappear is things, objects. So the first premise says whatever has a finite part has a cause. That's roughly the way that we're going to understand it. So I think that there's a counterexample. This isn't true. The exception is the universe. The universe has a finite past, but it doesn't have a cause, and there's no problem about that, so long as you think that the initial bit of the universe or the origin of the universe is necessary, which is what I do think. Because necessary things don't need causes.
So naturally, what would be the response to this? Just like, how do you know that it's necessary?
So that would be a kind of weird question, because we're just comparing two theories here, and you tell me your God's necessary, and I ask you, how do you know? And unless you're Brian Lefter, you'll just say, come on, that's sort of ground zero in my theory. It's just one of the things I'm committed to.
Okay, so positing necessity is perfectly fine.
Yeah, it's expensive, right? It's a theoretical cost every time you do it. And when we're comparing theories, right, that's on the,
so naturalism,
whatever it is, the debit side of the ledger, right? But the theists have already got it if they've said that God exists of necessity. And so I'm just making a naturalistic view that's parallel on that point. It's not more expensive for the naturalist; it's the same cost, and we pay it.
So I think that the initial answer that you gave me about the evaluating metaphysical theories is now starting to click. So it's like, well, you also have theoretical commitments. It's just when we are making a trade-off, yours are less than the theoretical commitments of theists. It's because most of the time when atheists present their worldviews, it's as if they don't believe. It's as if they don't have any commitment that resembles a commitment of their interlocutor, let's say. But now it's like, well, yeah, you of course you have theoretical commitments. It's just we need to evaluate which commitments are let's say which theories have minimal commitments and therefore the max. So yeah, you have a commitment, but it's not as heavy as the commitments of a theist.
So that's my view, and of course there'll be theists who disagree, but
yeah,
that's my view.
Okay, so another thing about about Professor Craig, and we can move on. You had a very interesting debate with him about the nature of mathematics. So the debate comes so to provide a rough sketch. So Eugene Wigner wrote a paper titled, if I'm not mistaken, "The Unusual Effectiveness of Mathematics in Explaining the Universe." William Lane Craig then constructs an argument to suggest that, well, the reason why mathematics has this, bizarre, strange, mysterious power to, sit down on a piece of paper, not knowing much about the universe, and work out equations, and all of a sudden, it so happens that you arrive at an equation or some mathematical entity, and then you find out that, actually it maps onto a reality. And the best explanation is that, well, God constructed the universe based on mathematical principles, and that's why we humans can work out those equations and then retroactively find out that, well, those equations actually correctly describe the universe, and therefore therefore God had therefore mathematics is not causally inert. It's not causally disconnected from the basic fabric of universe. and God constructed the universe on mathematical principles, and you object to that. Can you give me your your feelings about that debate and this idea? Or
So,
was my
when you, you know, you,
summary of Craig trustworthy or?
you, yeah, your summary's fine. But you can guess what I'm going to say. Um, and we've already got this postulate about the necessity of the universe in the version of naturalism that I like compared to Craig's version of theism. If mathematics applies to the universe, then it does so necessarily. So there's no mystery, right? There's nothing left to explain. It couldn't have been otherwise. Right? Now, you might think that sounds dodgy or a bit unsatisfactory, but it seems to me that once you've bought into the idea that all the possible world share history with the actual world and diverge from it only because indeterministic chances play out differently. Once you've bought into that, there's no further work that you need to do in order to explain why the universe has the mathematical structure that it does, on the assumption that indeterministic, the outplaying of indeterministic chances can't change the structure of the universe. So it's kind of straightforward.
So
There isn't anything unreasonable about the effectiveness of mathematics.
so what is it?
What might be surprising is that we've been able to discover some of the mathematics.
Discover. So you're using the word discover.
To discover the mathematics is in come to have knowledge of it.
Was it there? So I know the problem of the question that I will ask right now, but I will still do it. So was it there before we discovered it?
Sure. So let's suppose that let's pretend that Einstein's equations correctly describe the structure of space. Right. Well, before Einstein, those equations still correctly describe the structure of space. It's just that we didn't have the equations yet. Right? Space didn't change when Einstein developed his theory. It remained the way that it was before. And if space has a structure that's described by Einstein's theories, then it had it before Einstein.
So so there is no unusual effectiveness of mathematics. And
not according to me.
So what is it about what Craig claims about how you can sit down and work out equations and you can stumble upon the one that correctly describes the universe? Like, why is that possible? What makes it possible?
So there's an argument to be had about the extent to which that's really possible. So there's a couple of cases where physicists have claimed kind of to make interesting discoveries about the universe from the armchair while, working out mathematics. I'm very skeptical about that. I think that there are lots and lots of cases, and you only have to go and read in the physics journal to realise just how much stuff physicists write that make empirical predictions about the universe that turn out not to be true. And so if you cherry pick a couple of cases like Dirac's prediction for positron from the kind of working out of equations, you're just ignoring the fact that there's all this other stuff that people have been doing for hundreds of years now where it doesn't have those consequences. And if you accept that there is a mathematical structure there, occasionally people are going to happen on some of it in the armchair. That's not surprising, but it's consistent with the data, right? That most of the time that people do that, they aren't coming up with truths about the universe.
Okay.
Most physical theorising is false.